Okay, can everybody hear me? Great. So one thing that maybe some of you are aware of, I don't know, is that the smallest cores are several orders of magnitude more energy efficient than the largest ones. This is how the basis of how GPUs work. It's the basis of how the Xeon Phi works. But as you may have noticed, not all of the cores that we use today are really, really tiny. In fact, cores seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The last generation Xeon Phi has been discontinued and rumored to be replaced by something that looks a lot more like a many-core version of, say, an i7 or something. And yet, we know that there's such a big problem with the amount of energy consumption we have on big cores. We don't have the efficiency that we need to really drive compute forward. So is there maybe a middle ground we can have here? Can we have the performance of the big cores and the energy efficiency of the little cores by using the little cores to improve the performance of the big cores in some way? One of the issues with little cores is that they're a massive pain to program. Writing parallel code is hard, but maybe if we use the little cores to support the big core in some way, we can have an easier time of it. We can be more speculative about how we parallelize stuff. Or maybe we can write a parallel sort of support application once and use it for all applications. So the three examples that I'm going to talk about today are programmable prefetching. We've designed a fancy prefetcher that uses some sort of little cores to improve its performance. Fault tolerance applications, where you can make fault tolerance way more energy efficient than just having two copies of the core and running them together and comparing the results. And security applications, where you can dedicate quite a lot of parallel compute to security applications, where previously you just wouldn't bother. You'd have it insecure because you wouldn't have the performance budget for it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is programmable prefetching. So the stride prefetcher in a modern core is really, really good. It works very well, improves performance massively in a lot of cases. But often you get memory accesses that are way more complicated. What we're looking at over here is going to be an access for a hash table for, say, a database workload. So over on the left here, we're moving through this key list, iterating through. We access this element here, which we then use to index into a hash table based on a computation. And that's usually a last level cache miss, as long as these data structures are relatively large. Then we use that data in here to access another list, which is also a cache miss. And then we use that data to access another list, which is another miss, until we finally get the data we actually want. So this is really bad in terms of memory performance. But actually, in an ideal sense, we could do lots of these memory accesses all at the same time. While we're fetching all of these misses for this element, we can look ahead and fetch them for, say, this element. And again, the prefetch for this will miss on there, and will miss into here. But as long as we've got lots and lots of things happening at the same time, we can hide all of those misses. So the challenge is to design a prefetcher that can, say, handle the complications of these weird memory accesses, can handle computation on hash functions, and can deal with this in a really, really parallel manner. So this is a parallel task. So one way we can do this and make it programmable is loads of programmable units. When what we do is we connect all of these tiny programmable units, each probably 1,000th of the size of your big out-of-order superscalar core, to a fabric here that tells it what the main core is doing. Basically what we have here is something that connects to the L1 data cache, goes into an address filter to see if it's relevant to the programs that we're running over here to do the prefetching, sends it into a latency-tolerant queue. They go in here when they're ready, get spit out here to go back into the memory system, which can then loop round once any prefetchers generated here can come back up here and generate new prefetchers, which is something that you would need for something like walking a hash table, where you've got misses that create more misses, and you need to prefetch all of them. So I've mentioned that we're looking for parallelism here, and it's quite nice that prefetching is often more parallel than, say, just the application itself, and much easier to achieve that parallelization. we've got an application here that isn't in and of itself parallel because we've got a single value that we're adding to. It's a slightly fake example, but it works for this. So we have 3 arrays, A, B, and C, and we're using them all to index into each other. And so that's probably 3 cache misses that we've got happening, and you want to be able to deal with all of them without stalling. So what we can do is we can program our parallel prefetch units to observe the memory accesses that the main core is doing and prefetch them so that when it gets to those accesses, they just happen to be in the cache. So we observe that when this program is accessing something in A, we probably better prefetch ahead a little bit further into A to access the next thing. So we issue that prefetch, then we forget about it. And maybe later that prefetch comes back, and we know what to do with that because we've programmed it. When A comes back, we can use it to calculate the thing that will use A, which is B. So we calculate an address in B, send off the prefetch, forget about it, we'll maybe come back later, and if it does, we know what to do with it, we can use it to fetch into C. This is all very parallel because these can all be happening independently, and rather than stalling on the cache miss, we can just issue a prefetch, forget about it, deal with something else, and go back to it later. And the nice thing about this is that this is way easier to automate in the compiler than automatic parallelization is, because you don't actually have to be correct when you're doing a prefetch. Even if there are loads of, say, data race conditions in this, all you're doing is bringing data speculatively into the L1 cache. So this is way easier to analyze. You don't need to worry about aliasing because the worst thing that can happen is that you prefetch the wrong thing. And so this is an example where a support core way of doing this is easier for the programmer than actually parallelizing the application. And in fact, the application may not even be parallel because this can deal with data race conditions, whereas a true parallelization couldn't. Okay, so that's a very brief introduction to what we did there. There's more details in our ASPLOS paper from this year. Go and look it up if you're interested. But now we're going to talk about another use of attaching lots of little cores to a big core, which is processor error detection. So the way this works is that if you've got a processor executing a load of instructions and it gets hit by a cosmic ray, that might flip a bit in the calculation or in a register somewhere and totally break what you're doing. And clearly there are many circumstances where this is really bad. You don't want this to happen in your car, for example, because you don't want to crash and die. So in cars, in automotives, you usually have 2 copies of the core sat there in what's called a dual-core lockstep arrangement, where you compare the results from each processor to make sure that there's an agreement there's correctness. That's really expensive, though. Clearly, 2 copies of the core uses twice the amount of energy and twice the amount of silicon area. And the area is not so bad, but the energy is a real killer there. There's a reason that we don't support error detection and correction in like server systems, for example, because it's just too expensive. We're too energy bound already than to want to deal with a problem like this. However, error detection is actually a parallel process, so we can offload these onto lots of little cores. We can split up our execution that we had on this main core by taking periodic register checkpoints. And we can use those and check each register checkpoint individually for any program. And as long as we can get from the start to end of each register checkpoint on another core and it's still correct, then our original program was correct as well. So we can exploit that on a load of tiny checker cores. We store all of the loads and stores into a log to replay them, and then in parallel, while that's replaying on one core, we take this next checkpoint here, put the loads and stores into another log, and do that concurrently. And we can do all of this in parallel. There's no issue with overlapping this computation, so we can achieve it much, 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 much more efficiently than we would with just dual-core lockstep. We can reduce the overheads by at least an order of magnitude. The architecture to this is very similar to the programmable prefetcher. With the programmable prefetcher, we essentially had something that forwarded the loads that we had to a load of little cores for analysis and to feed them back through. Here we have something that takes the instructions that the main core did, filters out the loads and stores and the addresses to those so that we can check them, sends them into a log that is partitioned so that we can check each one separately, has little register checkpoints so that we can check that between each one we had the same correct value, and sends us some little cores to do the checking. Now, these little cores are actually a little bit bigger than the little cores that we looked at for the programmable prefetching, because these are actually running the exact same instructions that this did. So that means you really do need to support the same processor architecture. You really do need these to be, say, ARM A-class cores rather than M-class cores. But they're still much smaller. You can still do this with a core that's much, much smaller than, say, even a moderately sized out-of-order superscalar core, and get massive benefits in terms of energy and area overhead. Okay, again, we have a paper on this. We had that at DSN this year. If you're interested in the techniques we've got there or the details that we went into, go and take a look. Next thing, finally, we're going to talk about is programmable hardware security. So we've looked at a performance improvement. We've looked at reducing the overheads of safety. Now we want to look at reducing the overheads of security. As I mentioned earlier, there's lots of techniques out there to improve the security of processors, but they're all just too expensive for us to actually run. But maybe that's not actually true. If these things are parallelizable, we can run software versions of them on little cores and not have to pay the overheads. And one of the more fun things is that rather than fixed function hardware, when we get new vulnerabilities exposed that, for example, reduce performance by like 30% and end up in the news, then we don't have to pay that performance deficit necessarily. Maybe we can just deal with the problem on some parallel hardware that we've got sat there, just in case of the eventuality that we get a new security vulnerability, which I assume would never happen, and deal with it that way. So there's a ton of different things that are a problem these days, many of which are more fashionable than others. And the idea is that you want some parallel hardware that can kind of deal with all of these. Again, we've got a similar architecture here, a load of little cores attached to some analysis hardware that takes the instructions from the main core and can work out whether it's interested in them, send them off to the appropriate little core here that we call a guardian processing element, and deal with those accordingly. We also have some special hardware here for forwarding, say, events from the main core so that we can analyze them, and also some hardware to deal with concurrency issues, so that we've got, rather than having to take out locks, you can update a memory region that is guaranteed safe under additions, so that you can kind of make these things more parallel than they would otherwise be using dedicated hardware. The kind of idea we've got here is that you can achieve parallelism in two ways, one of which is to run lots of different security properties at the same time. Say we have a shadow stack to make sure that no one's trying to attack our call stack, at the same time as some sort of machine learning-based malware detector, at the same time as some sort of row hammer detector. But also, each one of these can spread across multiple cores if the detection strategy is itself parallel. So we've got two ways of dealing with that so that we can achieve lots of things at the same time. As an example of one of the ways that these algorithms are parallel, this is achieving a shadow stack on these little cores, where we check that the thing that we pushed onto the core stack is the same as the thing that we popped off the stack so that nobody's attacking us. So we can send all of these off to be pre-filtered by a little core that gets rid of the push-pop pairs, so that we then only have to send off the events here that we couldn't deal with locally. So that means we can deal with most of the computation in parallel, and then have a coordinating core that checks that, oh, actually, we have been attacked. This thing here isn't the same thing as that thing there, but all of these things are the same. So we can deal with these in a parallel way, and it's an example of how we can achieve parallelism in a single algorithm and apply it to lots of different applications to get that efficiency up. Okay, so that's 3 examples, but clearly there are lots more ways in that if you had a big core with lots of little cores surrounding it that are very, very efficient, that we can improve the performance of that big core. I think this is a different way of looking at parallelism that might allow us to apply parallelism in a lot of areas that it wasn't previously. Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have any questions?
On your second example, can you go to the second example?
Yep.
Yeah. How do you make sure that, yeah, that one? How do you make sure that there is no data dependency when you want to simulate or re-execute all the instructions on each little core that you have there?
Oh, so there can be data dependencies. The point is that you're replaying the loads and stores that this core actually saw. So that means that implicitly deals with the data dependencies. You don't need the original program to be parallel for its error detection to be parallel, because you've got that replay functionality where you can assume temporarily that the main core was correct and then work out whether it wasn't later.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that the checker cores do have to be A-class, say if the main one you're checking is A-class?
Yep.
But that it's still more energy efficient because they're smaller in some way? Like, are they running at a lower clock speed, or like, in what way is it more efficient?
Sort of any way that you can make it more efficient, because the point is here you've got basically arbitrary amounts of parallelism. So one of those ways is, yes, reduce the clock frequency, which will directly impact your power consumption, but it will also reduce the silicon area overhead because you can make the core actually small. You don't need to pipeline it as much. You don't need the speculation hardware. There's no point in having a branch predictor. You can have something here that really is something like a two-stage pipeline. It just happens to implement the same ISA as an A-class. And you can pool resources. If you've got things like an FPU that isn't used very much, you can share those between different little cores.
So there's obviously a delay here compared with lockstep dual core. So what's the significance of the delay in, say, an automotive application?
Well, it depends, doesn't it? If you're thinking about the direct delays that we have here, they're on the orders of nanoseconds to microseconds, which in the practical sense of an automotive application, you can't do anything in a microsecond. So actually, in that case, it doesn't matter at all. Even with the dual-core lockstep system, you don't try and recover from the error or anything. You literally just restart the processor if you detect an error. So we're already paying a delay in getting back to correct functionality. But you can do things here to correct errors to make sure that they don't propagate, so that you never actually even observe an error, even though there is a delay in finding it. And so it's just a very minor performance overhead in the case where you've got errors. But more generally, for the exact automotive example, it really doesn't matter.
Any more questions? Can I ask one then? I was wondering if there is some degree of virtualization of these helper cores, as in, can you have more helper tasks than the cores, or?
We don't directly support that, but yeah, that's the idea, that you do want to be able to deal with lots of different programs and lots of different applications at once. One of the interesting things about especially the security tasks is that, in fact, we've got a little slide. This is one of the examples of using shadow stacks. And the amount of microcores that we need for this is really different compared to each application. With some, you can get away with 2. Others, you really need 12 to stop the performance overhead. So some virtualization is good there so that you can dynamically allocate resources.